Alright, in this video we are going to look at meshes, how they work, and kind of how to apply them to some different objects. So first thing I want to do is I'm going to create a little sample mesh here. So we're going to make an object, some kind of shape. I gave it a fill color. In this case I just used a rectangle. This would work with any path though, so whether you create it with a pen or whether you use your basic shapes, it still has the path, and that's what we're going to apply the mesh to. Something to kind of be aware of with meshes. When I make this shape into a mesh, it's difficult to impossible to turn it back to a normal shape. Now with a rectangle, no big deal. If I decide I don't want this thing to be a mesh, let's say I wanted it to be a gradient on here. Now I couldn't make a meshed object have a gradient. I would have to then remake this rectangle because again I can't go backwards. So if it's something that you made with a pen tool and you took a lot of time tracing it, you may want to duplicate the object and leave one as just a plain old shape, so that if you want to put a gradient on it, you just want a solid fill color on it, you could do that, and then you can mess with the other one as a mesh just to kind of see if it works out, because sometimes meshes don't work, and we'll kind of get into that a little bit later in the video. So first, all we have so far is this rectangle. I gave it a fill color. I am now on my mesh tool here. The keyboard shortcut is U. I'm going to click just one time somewhere on this object. It adds these two lines, a horizontal and a vertical line. It also added a dot at that intersection and some dots at the ends of those lines. So what that allows me to do is if I take direct selection and I select one of these dots, I can change the fill color at that point, and all of a sudden you see what we have. What's actually happening, we have four different gradients right now. I have a gradient fading from this green color here to the red that is out here. So this fades as in a gradient in this direction. Same deal in the other three directions. Green to red, green to red, green to red. So it's four different gradients. Reason I stress that, we can also kind of move these things around, and depending on how close the dots are, like if I move this dot this direction, that gradient must fade much quicker. That's part of the reason why we're seeing this color change happen so abruptly. Now as I move this around, you also notice these lines aren't just straight lines. These are pen tool paths. So I can adjust the handles just like we would on a normal pen tool object to adjust the curves. I can shrink those down, and if I shrink these and I put these closer together, I'm going to get a little different effect. Now it fades a little bit smoother. Before, if you notice, it was like green kind of overlapping straight to red. So that's kind of one thing I can do with this. I can add more mesh dots. As I click, it adds a horizontal and a vertical line. At the intersections of all my lines are different points where I can change the color. And again, at the end of each line is the point that I can change the color. Sometimes you may just want to add, let's say, a horizontal line but not a vertical line. If you go to one of your lines and you click on that line, it'll just add the opposite. So in this case, I just added a horizontal. To select more than one dot at a time, there's a couple ways we can do that. I can click in between dots. That selects all the dots kind of near that thing. And then I can change the fill color, and it'll affect all those dots at once. Another way to do this, I can use my lasso tool, so it's near the direct selection, and if I draw a lasso, draw a shape around any dots that I want to pick, when I let go, it selects all those dots, and once again, I can change the fill color just for those dots. So let's take a look at that. There we go. So this is a nice thing to be able to do if you want to color in a large chunk at a time. Let's say I want this exact same yellow that I used here in this corner. I can take my direct selection, select the dot that I want to change, use the eyedropper, and eyedrop from over here that color that I wanted. And now those are the exact same shades of yellow, so that's kind of nice to be able to do as well. The more mesh dots we add, the quicker color has to fade, and it kind of starts looking awkward. So in general, less is more with the mesh. You can get smoother, more consistent fades. It won't look so blocky and kind of abrupt like this one does if you have less mesh points. To get rid of mesh points, if you hold Option with the mesh tool or Alt on a PC, you can delete mesh points. So even if I delete all these, it won't go back to being a normal shape. I wouldn't be able to put a gradient on this thing. It's still going to be a mesh. So just something to kind of be aware of. I'm going to go ahead and delete this one, and I want to now create a star just to kind of show you what this does. I'm going to add a mesh point to this, and what you notice is the lines are not straight down and straight across. What the meshes do is they try to mimic the outside of the object. So that's why this line, instead of being straight across, is kind of more shaped like this. And once again, I could take my direct selection and I can move these dots around. I can play with the little arms and kind of adjust this thing if I need that to look a little different. The only reason you would need that to look different is if you put a color inside of here, it's going to fade kind of a little bit differently maybe than I wanted, and as I move this around and adjust the little arms, it'll change kind of how the color flows. Again, I can change the color at the ends of these lines and also around the exterior of the star. So anywhere that I kind of see the yellow, I can change into different colors. So maybe I just want the outside of this to be a certain color. So I can kind of work my way around to different spots. And some of them you see if they're white, they're not really doing much. But the yellow ones here are the ones that I would want to make this bright pink color. And again, if I worked my way all the way around like that, this whole outside would be this purple color. So let's apply this now to an actual kind of useful project. I have a picture that I'm going to use for this, and it is this bowl of fruit. So I'm dragging it, if you notice, from my desktop directly onto this document, and that's going to create a little problem for us, and I'm doing this on purpose. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of shrink this so it fits on my page. I'm holding shift when I scale this thing, and what that's doing is that is keeping it in proportion, so nothing gets all stretched out on me. So I'm shrinking, getting there. Alright, so this is how I normally start these things if I'm doing some kind of project where I'm just tracing something that exists. So first thing I got to do is I got to get rid of this X that's on top of here. Basically what this means is if you were to save this file and open it on somebody else's computer, this picture is not going to show up. This picture is not really here. In this space where we're seeing this picture, what the computer does is it just shows us a preview of this document that's saved to my desktop, this picture that's saved to my desktop. So again, that's not on everybody's computer, so it won't show up on somebody else's. But, moral of the story, if you select an image and you click embed, that'll get rid of that X, and now it's actually part of this document. That's important because we're going to use the eyedropper a lot for this, so that will kind of prevent you from running into problems with the eyedropper where it'll only go black. So if you're using the eyedropper and the only color you can pick is black, you have not embedded the picture. Alright, so what I'm going to do now, I'm looking at my layers window and I'm going to zoom out a bit. I'm going to duplicate this picture. Again, I just held Option with my selection tool and drag that out. I'm going to shrink this one down. This one I'm going to use to help me figure out colors. This is going to be the one that I trace. So this one that I'm going to trace, I'm going to go ahead and lock. I'm even going to rename this tracing, and for this one maybe color, again, just to kind of help me look at these things. So let's look at the line. To do the line, I'm going to take my pen tool, I'm going to zoom in. That's kind of a key with the pen. If you zoom in, it's much, much easier. The less points we have, the better a mesh is going to work. Very complicated objects won't even let you make them a mesh. It'll actually tell you there's too many points for this to be a mesh. So I'm just going to try to do this line in as few kind of shapes as possible. So I'm working my way around here, and if this fill color gets in my way, I can eliminate that. Don't forget to, and I can always go back and adjust this, which I'm sure I'll need to do. So going around there, I did maybe like 3 or 4 points was it. If you notice, I let this kind of flow over knowing that that bowl would be there later. So again, the simpler the shape, the better for the mesh, so that's why I did that. If I had that flat spot there, my mesh lines might kind of start looking funky. So I'm just adjusting here to kind of clean up my shape. And that's pretty good. Now if I was doing this for real, I could be a little more focused on that. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to eyedrop this general lime color. So I still have this object selected. I go over to my eyedropper and I'm just going to pick the general green color that this is. Now if you notice, as I'm holding my mouse button down, when I move around, my fill color in the toolbar changes. So that's a good color for that thing. I'm now going to zoom out some and I'm going to look at this picture. So what I'm looking at is I'm seeing a highlight over here. So I want to put that on my line. I'm going to go to my mesh tool, and again, we said less is more. I'm just going to click just one time for right now, right here. I'm going to eyedrop. Now that point is still selected, so I'm going to eyedrop this highlight color, and it changes here. And now it's fading from this lighter green to that darker green we had, lighter to darker, kind of all the way around. So that's how I got what I got. I can pick other points on this mesh and eyedrop its corresponding point over here. So I have this point selected, I'm going to click near the top of the screen. And that will kind of help me color this thing. I can work my way around. I notice there's a shadow over here, so I'm going to take some of those and eyedrop the shadow color. Now that one didn't do much. Sometimes you'll get that on the exterior ones. They may not actually kind of change anything. But if you keep working your way, you'll figure out which ones kind of do have the effect. So there we go. So that's starting to give me that shadow. Now looking at this as I go, even if I work my way all the way around, I don't think I'm going to be able to get this darker area in here. So I'm going to add one more mesh point to this. Right there. And now what I can do is I can, again, eyedrop these different colors that I want. And if I continue doing this, I'm going to get pretty close to what that line looks like. Now meshes kind of aren't the answer to everything. What I mean by that is this stem, here, let's zoom in on that, I'm still going to trace that as its own thing. And if you notice, it's not like I did that whole bowl of fruit and the outline of it and I'm like trying to do this whole thing as a mesh. This would still be its own shape. These are all their own shapes, just like we've done kind of earlier in the year. But that's how you can use the meshes to your advantage. Now, start with easier objects like what I did here, the orange, this apple's not too bad, this apple's not too bad. Then work up to harder ones like this banana is a good kind of transition one, because what's going to happen is if you want this color to fade quickly from here to here, we need mesh points to be close together when we want that to happen. So what you can do is you could just click and make them close together. But if I already had some, I could also just to show you, the closer they are, kind of like that, you know, we can get that color to fade quickly. So start with the easy ones, kind of work your way up to the tougher ones. Keep using the eyedropper. It's nice, like I said, to have a small version of the picture so you can eyedrop and a bigger version that is locked in place to trace. Good luck.